Hey Lois. Hey
Hey,
Estelle.
Rabbi. Hi, Estelle.
Hi.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, David.
Yes.
So I found an article about testifying, or at least brings up the subject of testifying when there is danger. It's not a, it's a, it doesn't spend a lot of time defining the circumstance. It more just brings up the issue, but I think it's worth seeing. I don't know this person, but it looks well researched. And that's good enough for us. Hey, Sam. So here we go. Something happened there. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. It said some unauthorized something or other happened. So we're back to this. Can you guys hear me? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I don't know what happened this time. It's apparently unauthorized, whatever I did. All right, let's try this again. What I sent. Try this again. Okay, so what is a citizen's duty in upholding a responsible criminal justice system? Our Parsha addresses that question head on with a seemingly clear commandment. Any person who sins, having heard a public imprecation and is a witness, having seen or known, if they do not tell, then they must bear their crime. So in this case, we're talking about people who witnessed somebody saying something wrong in public, cursing God or saying something, something wrong in public and doesn't come forward, they bear sin for their crime. But it has been expanded to mean if you know evidence of a crime, you have to come forward, or evidence to support one side or another in a court case, you must come forward. And this is our mitzvah that we've been talking about. The language may be a little technical and legalistic, but the point is clear. You are committing a crime if you don't step forward when you have relevant testimony. As the medieval legal code, the Tur, Rav Yaakov, the son of Asher, who lived 1269 to 1343, catalogs it. Anyone who knows testimony about another person and is fit to testify it, and it has impact on another person, is required to testify, whether they alone know the testimony or there's somebody else with them. If you see something say something. How can we ever hope that abusers and exploiters be stopped from hurting people if witnesses don't come forward? The requirement to come forward and testify is very difficult to enforce. Today, law enforcement officials regularly complain about their inability to interrupt cycles of crime because civilians in the affected community refuse to step forward and share information, testify, snitch. The Torah says, ominously, that such a person must bear their crime, indicating that this crime is not punishable in human court, but only in divine court. Talmud Bavli Bava Kama. The fact that the Torah needs to legislate this law and dangle it from the fear of God reflects the fact that people have many reasons not to want to cooperate with police, prosecutors, civil attorneys, or anyone else associated with the court system. First of all, people might have valid reasons to fear repercussions from those implicated by their testimony. Elsewhere, the Torah commands those involved in the justice system do not fear any man, which may well imply do not fear the man. Rashi cites a midrash indicating that the word for fear, taguru, might include a balance of hoarding. In other words, hiding what you have to yourself, silencing your voice. The 3rd century midrash Tanoim spells this out so that you do not say, I'm afraid of so-and-so, lest they kill my child, or lest they light my haystack on fire, or lest they cut down some of my saplings. The horrors faced by brave women like Anita Hill, Christine Blasey Ford, and so many others who have stepped forward to testify against powerful men are just the tip of the iceberg of why people have good reason to be afraid. But the Torah tells you not to. That's a hard mitzvah. The rabbis show that they understood the treacheries involved in testifying. You might ruin your own life. You might also ruin someone else's life. The Mishnah legislates that judges are required to impress upon a witness in a capital case just how profound the implications are if the witness gets it wrong. No, the capital cases are not like monetary cases. In monetary cases, a person can return the money, be cleared. But in capital cases, this person's blood and the blood of all their future offspring hang on you until the end of time. For thus we find with regard to Cain, who killed his brother, the bloods of your brother cry out. It doesn't say the blood of your brother, but the bloods of your brother, his blood and the blood of his future offspring. For this reason, Adam is created alone, to teach you that anyone who destroys a life is considered by Scripture to have destroyed an entire world. And anyone who sustains a life is considered by Scripture to have sustained an entire world. The rabbis understand the risks in coming on so strong on witnesses, concluding the Mishnah, unless you now say, why do we need this? All this is trouble. What do I need all this trouble for? But it has already been stated, if someone is a witness, having seen or known, and does not express it, they shall bear sin. Unless you shall now say, what do we need this? To be liable for this person's blood, but it's already been stated, when the wicked are destroyed, there is rejoicing. So it's complex. Let's just say that. It's complex. You've got forces going in different directions. On the one hand, they are very sternly trying to impress upon you if you make if you do the wrong thing or make a mistake and hurt somebody else's life, that is on that is your responsibility. But also, if you don't speak up, that is your responsibility. Everything we have said so far reflects a utopian view that ordinary citizens have reason to trust the honesty, integrity, and strength of the criminal justice system. Our own lives teach us how unreliable that assumption is. The rabbis were well aware of this problem as well. The same 3rd century Tanoim recognized the intimidation of witnesses face from aggrieved parties, and from the gravity of the work also placed restrictions on witnesses from testifying. A witness who knows that another witness is a robber, from where is it derived that they should not join them? You shouldn't testify together with them. So Scripture says in Exodus Shemos, the Torah portion of Mishpatim, from falsehood you must distance yourself. Midvar sheker tirchak. The legal code specify that this prohibition against testifying together with a criminal applies even when the testimony that the criminal witness would testify is true. Shulchan Aruch Osher Mishpat. Offering true testimony that will materially affect the lives of others is less true in the big picture than withholding it. If offering the testimony will rehabilitate or validate the public standing of a criminal who is shaking down the community, is considered dishonest to do anything to whitewash the Martin Shkreli's, Wells Fargo, or Jared Kushner's of the world, even if they happen to be telling the truth in this particular case. Moreover, the rabbis understood well that many courts are compromised. The Talmud relates that either Rava or Rav Huna declared that everyone in both Babylonia and the land of Israel are in consensus to excommunicate a Jew who voluntarily testifies in Gentile court on behalf of a Gentile against a fellow Jew. On the face of it, this might imply nothing more than crude Jewish supremacy, prioritizing Jewish power over truth and justice and dismissing the humanity of Gentiles. Such an attitude is familiar. The ideology of snitches get snitches is generally directed internally within an in-group. However, the Talmud explains the reasoning for the threat of excommunication, because the Gentile courts expropriate money on the word of one witness. The Sasanian courts were rejected because they were seen to exercise inadequate judicial standards. The Talmud goes on to say that if there was a second witness joining the testimony against a Jewish person, there's no objection to testifying. Moreover, the Talmud explains the prohibition only applies to village courts, not to official government courthouses, which were seen to follow appropriate, rigorous standards. It all depends on the integrity of the judicial system. Presumably, one should also not testify before a corrupt Jewish court. All right, this last section here is interesting. So we'd have to see more about this. We're not going to go that deep into this, but I'm saying if you were looking into this last half of the paragraph, you want to know more about it because it really does change the tone of that first statement that you are going to be excommunicated if you testify against a Jew on behalf of a Gentile in a Gentile court. So he is saying that if there's two of you, and also he's suggesting if the court itself is trusted to have integrity, that this would not be the case. All right. Where this leaves us is that you and I and our communities have no choice. The Torah demands that we constantly assess the reality of our justice system. If it operates righteously and justly, the Torah requires our participation, even at great personal risk. By the way, that determination, if it's operating righteously and justly, that also can't just be your opinion. Because if it's just your opinion, everybody thinks that. Look at Donald Trump. He claims that the court is corrupt and that it's just trying to ensure that he doesn't get elected president. You know, it certainly can't just be left to the assessment of the individual in the moment. There has to be some way of determining this, because this is allowing you to ignore your responsibility as a citizen. So I don't know he doesn't, certainly not, and it's not the scope of this article to do that. And I personally don't know what the standards would be to determine that a system is not just, but certainly there would have to be standards.
Are there any remedies for the witnesses offered as a practical matter? I mean, if you have people that that take revenge, and with almost certainly that it's the consequences are going to descend upon you, and probably the court does too.
Right.
Now you don't have to risk your life if you have, I guess, if you have a greater than 50% chance of dying, something like that. So is the same sort of thing apply here if you estimate the thing?
Right, but I have heard those, including Rabbi Rosner, he mentioned this, and he said that it sounds like here, even if you were sure you're going to die, you have to testify. That this would be a case of Yaharig Val Yavor.
Yeah.
But but it needs more. I mean, obviously, it needs more than this. But it was brought up that I don't know if this is something everybody would agree to. It does seem like judges and witnesses are expected to testify, even though they're being threatened. But you're making a good point. I don't know what exactly. Again, when I was trying to search for it, it was hard for me to find somebody who does a more thorough job specifically about that, because that's really what I wanted. But at least he brings it up here. Don't let powerful people intimidate you. Speak up. If you don't, let it be on your head. But if the justice system doesn't operate righteously or justly, if it lets bullies extort the weak, all the more so if it prosecutes the innocent and exonerates oppressors, then we're forbidden from participating. We're forbidden from following the Torah's commandments in this week's parasha. So if the system itself is corrupt, but again, who determines if the system is corrupt? There has to be some standard. An unjust court system may be even worse than no system at all because it grants perverse legitimacy to exploiters and abusers. We may not participate. Snitches may not get stitches, but they do merit excommunication. We have no choice but to assess our reality honestly and to reform our justice system so we may fulfill the commandments of the Torah. Now, again, he is taking this as a call to even work on the secular justice system or the Gentile justice system. There isn't clear, that's a stretch, from this. But the general notion of how a Jewish court system should run certainly is being discussed in these sources. So I wish that I could find somebody who would define the circumstances under which a person has to testify, even though they are put at risk, and the underlying principle. Is it true that this is, in some ways, Yaharig Val Yavor, that you have to let yourself be killed and not transgress it? Or is it more like what David was quoting, which is that even though the Torah says that you have to very much guard your lives, and they say v'chai b'hem, that you have to live by them. So even though that's the case, you are allowed to put yourself at some risk for mitzvahs. After all, throughout history, women gave birth. Women got pregnant and gave birth, even though giving birth was a very dangerous thing to do. People moved to Eretz Yisrael and live in Eretz Yisrael, even though living in Eretz Yisrael during different periods of history was a very dangerous thing to do. There are people who nowadays do donate organs, kidneys, and things like that, even though it poses a danger to the person that's doing it. But you're allowed, especially for something that's a mitzvah, you're allowed to put yourself at some risk in order to accomplish that mitzvah. But you're not supposed to put yourself, you're not supposed to die for most mitzvahs. So, in other words, how far does this go? Is this really a Yaharig Val Yavor, or is it more like other mitzvahs? I'm not going to explore as much the thing about going to Gentile courts. That's another subject. That's not really our subject. Okay, so that was that. And again, if I see anything, we'll on those topics, we'll we'll look at it. Righty. All right, so this is mitzvah 179. That is that he, capital H, God, commanded us to investigate the testimony and to inquire about it well. So when it says us, it means the judges. So what happens is that a witness comes before the judges. Let's say there's 3 judges. There are no attorneys. There's nobody representing the plaintiffs. So you have, let's say you have Bob and Joe. Bob says Joe owes him $100. So Bob takes Joe to the court, and let's say Joe says he has witnesses that he paid him back. So the court does all the fact finding. The court are the ones that ask all the questions. They're not supposed to be attorneys there. In relatively modern history, there have been people, they call them to'ein rabbani. They're not supposed to act adversarially. In other words, it's not supposed to be an adversarial system. The way it happens in American courts is you have an attorney and the other side has an attorney, and you're competing against each other. That's how it's set up. You are competing against each other. You're trying to come up with the best claims before the court. And the assumption is that the truth will come out in such a situation because both sides are working so hard, one to defend and one to convict, that all the best arguments are going to end up being made, and then that allows for the truth to come out. So that's an adversarial system. The Torah system is not adversarial. The Torah system is that you're going to have judges, and they are going to anticipate the issues. They're going to figure out the best questions to ask. They're going to ask those questions, and the truth will come out. So they're the ones who are, as they're listening to the witnesses, they are going to ask all sorts of questions. Witness A says that I saw Bob pay it back on Tuesday at 3 p.m. And so the judge might say, how do you know it was 3 p.m.? And he'll say, because he had just checked his watch, or he heard the news come on, and and then the news comes on at 3, and it was on the hour, and it announced it was 3 o'clock or something like that. And so and then he whatever he says, they might ask for some kind of they must ask a follow-up question, etc. So afterwards, we judge the case and reach the truth. And we enhance this to the greatest of our abilities, such that we not judge the case quickly with the first word and kill the innocent. And again, they are using the example of kill the innocent, but this would also be true in any matter, even a monetary matter. When I shared with you my experience with the Chicago Rabbinical Council, that's exactly what happened. They heard testimony, and then they started asking questions. And as they asked questions, the facts came out. Now, this does assume good actors. If there aren't good actors, then the court also has to figure that out, that they might be dealing with somebody that they can't necessarily trust. They can't necessarily trust their version of events, and then they have to figure out what to do in such a case. But let's say we're assuming good actors, like the movie My Cousin Vinny. If in the premise of My Cousin Vinny, you have two young men who are accused of an armed robbery of like a little grocery store and the murder of somebody. Now, all the people, including the sheriff and all the witnesses that are coming, and including the prosecutor, they are not, they're just assuming that these kids are guilty, but they're not corrupt. They're not lying. They're not, there isn't going to be lying or corruption. There is going to be perhaps a selection of how you say things because you believe the person's guilty, or things like that. But that's something that can happen even to well-meaning people. So this is assuming something like that. When the witnesses are shown that they may not have seen these two guys robbing the store, they go, oh, you're right. And when everybody finds out at the end that these guys are innocent, they're actually genuinely happy, right? This is the assumption of how a case should turn out in a Jewish court. That obviously the guy who thinks the guy owes him $100 is not going to be thrilled that he didn't get his $100, but everybody else that's involved in this is meant to be happy that that it worked out the way it did when the final verdict's read. And even that person who didn't get back his $100 is supposed to be happy that justice was served. But okay. And that is his saying, again, with a capital H, God, you must inquire and investigate. And the regulations of this commandment and its content, and how the investigation inquires to be, and what will enhance it with, and how the testimony is established or fulfilled or nullified according to these investigations and inquiries, has already been explained in Tractates on Hebron. So that's the tractate where they really do a deep dive into the judicial process. But again, your goal is at the end that the truth comes out. Can you guarantee that the truth is going to come out? That what you had is the truth? No. Even the Rambam, he doesn't write it here. I don't think he didn't write it so far, but he does write it in his codes. The Rambam says that the Torah tells you to trust two witnesses. If these witnesses come forward and they give you testimony, and you examined their testimony and it stands, then that's going to end up being the law. That's going to be your decision based on that testimony. Now, is it possible they made a mistake? Yes. Is it possible that the judgment that you rendered was not the truth? Yes. You're only promising to follow the sort of rules of what should lead to a truthful judgment. But you, as a human court, can't guarantee that a truthful judgment happened. And this is something I've often quoted in the name of Anton Scalia, that he said that not getting to a truthful verdict is not grounds to overturn on appeal. If you want to appeal something, you can't argue that they didn't come to the right conclusion. You have to argue that they violated the rules of the judiciary, that something was supposed to happen in a particular way and it didn't. So the attorney, this person wasn't properly represented. That could be grounds for an appeal, that their lawyer was incompetent, or that the judge gave a wrong kind of directions to the jury, or things like that. They allowed for testimony that shouldn't have been allowed according to the rules. Those could be grounds for an appeal. But to say that, because under the Constitution, everybody is afforded the right of a fair trial, but you're not necessarily afforded the right to the true to a true conclusion, because nobody can guarantee that you get to a true conclusion. So it would be something like that, not exactly, but something like that. Also with when it comes to a rabbinical court, your goal is that everything be done according to the Torah's instructions, and that means that you're trying to get to the truth of it. That is part of what the Torah wants you to do. But did you get to the truth of it? We don't know. All we know is that you tried your best and you followed all the rules.
But in this case, isn't there there's a presumption that there may be some sort of doubt in the case?
In every case, or just this particular case?
I'm not sure.
Because I mean, I think as a judge, you're being asked to be curious. There is the teaching in that when when plaintiffs come before you, that you should see them as guilty beforehand. I don't know if you could translate that to mean be skeptical. I know it seems like from my very thorough review of police tactics using TV shows, mainly my work is mainly focused on how they're presented in television shows, and I've tried to do as thorough a investigation as possible. So it seems like that policemen or detectives are encouraged not to believe people when they're speaking to them. Malcolm Gladwell has this book. Talking to Strangers. And a big part of this book, I mean, I haven't read the whole book, but a big part of it so far is how we're not really good at figuring out if somebody's telling us the truth. Typically, people aren't. Even people who think they're good at it, at sort of figuring that out, tend to not be as good as they think they are about it. So my understanding is that there are people like detectives and others who are meant to assume that the people that they're not telling you at least the whole truth when they're speaking to you. And it could be that's part of that notion that's saying, when you're saying to judges, assume they're guilty, that they mean that. In other words, be skeptical.
I understand that, but I was thinking, I didn't understand Scalia's thing exactly when it heard me. It put me very much in. I was thinking he was talking about a case. There may have been a factual error made. A detective made it something, the lab technician something, but all of that, according to Scalia's thing, is not grounds for an appeal. But then you're perverting the entire judicial system. It uproots it. You're letting an innocent man die, which seems to be, that's the antithesis. Do anything else you want. Let the wicked go free, but don't let an innocent person die.
But then, which I would agree, like they had, I mean, you still have an option within the United States. I remember hearing of cases similar to this in England, where what the jury would come to a conclusion, and then they would ask the king to pardon the person. Now you'd have to accept a certain partnership between a kind of reliable partnership between the president and the courts, but it could be the court can't do that. In other words, it might be too much of a reach for the court to make a decision outside of the boundaries of law, and that might be that they have to appeal to the president to pardon the person in such a case,
or governor, or whoever has the
governor
power.
Right. It could be that is a kind of assumed partnership there. I don't know. There was a case in England. There's I think the professor's name is Sandel, Michael Sandel, something like that. There's a series, you can watch it on YouTube. It's called Justice. And it's a course that he gives at Harvard. And so they show the lectures, and also I guess they give you access to some of the readings that he assigned for the course. It was actually a pretty cool course. It's called Justice. So he mentioned a case where the case was that there were these I think 4 people who survived a shipwreck. The ship sank. This wasn't a passenger ship, it was like a working ship. So there was like the captain and some sailors, and there was one like low-ranking sailor who was on their life raft, where they quickly ate up all the food. There wasn't really food. They didn't have fresh water. This young sailor drank seawater, even though they told him not to, and he got very sick. And they felt he was dying anyways, and they made the decision to kill him in order to eat him so that they could survive. And they did, in fact, survive. But then it went to trial because one of the 3 survivors told brought it up, and so the case went to trial, and they found them guilty of murder, but then they appealed to the crown to pardon them. Because in other words, it was one of these things where this is not exactly our case, but it showed me a model of how I guess you'd have to expect this to work, because you do what your job is, and then you'd appeal to the crown to do what their job is. So I'm assuming that's what Scalia would have to say, that obviously you don't want to put an innocent person to death. And but the question is, do you alter the legal system in that way, or bend the legal system so it doesn't happen? It happens all the time on those procedural shows with the police, and even with Sherlock Holmes and Hercule Poirot. And there are instances where both Sherlock Holmes and Hercule Poirot let somebody go, even though they knew they did something wrong, because they understood the underlying motivation and felt that morally.
Yes, I just saw a Poirot where that happened.
Never happened to Columbo.
It never happened with Columbo. I may have to rewatch. Now I'm gonna have to rewatch every Columbo just to find that.
Sure?
I'm positive.
I'm not sure. They are a little hard to watch. They're not. The Columbos are. For some reason they feel long. The Columbos, but I would do it. I would watch it just to find out if he never let anybody.
He was very explicit. He always used to say, I know I seem like I'm a really nice guy, and I am, he says, but I do my job.
Right.
Even in the most sympathetic, an actress, she lost her mind and she didn't have line, and he very reluctantly accepted the false confession. But
I'm glad you brought that up. It's good to know that he's an outlier.
There was that case in Georgia, Frank, the Jewish guy who was falsely accused, and the governor of Georgia commuted his sentence. I don't know if he pardoned him, but then he was lynched by a mob.
Yes, right. He was released, and it cost him his future. This man, and he knew what he was doing. He knew his political future, and he did it.
Oh, the governor.
The governor.
Yeah.
Leo Frank.
Some terrible case with immigrants trying to cross in Mexico.
Oh, really?
That the army wouldn't let
them. Yeah.
Go. I mean, I hope that's not true. I hope they find out the details are not true. That would be so terrible. Okay, I look forward to meeting again tomorrow and learning more.
Ditto. Thank you. Bye, all.
Be well. Bye, Estelle. Bye, Sam.
Stay warm. Bye.
Stay warm. Yeah.